Briahna, what's on your radar?
Well, today I'm asking who represents the biggest threat to establishment politics in America? Well, follow the money and you'll find out. According to an article published this week by 2016 Bernie Sanders campaign manager Jeff Weaver, a corporatist coup has been launched by a wide array of allied groups, including crypto speculators, the oil industry, pharmaceuticals, finance, and even Republicans. And who are they targeting? Populist progressive candidates fighting for higher wages, universal health care, climate reform, and criminal justice reform. I've noted on this program and elsewhere that a key difference between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party is that Republicans respect their base, Democrats loathe theirs. And now there's evidence that Democrats leverage more resources and are more effective at killing the only energy that exists on the left than they are at defeating Republican opponents. We saw how this went down in Ohio's 11th district, where super PACs like AIPAC and DMFI, the Democratic Majority for Israel, raised millions of dollars for attack ads against Nina Turner, ultimately damning both her runs. These groups not only launched ads that lied about her political record, they attempted to silence her by inaccurately smearing her as anti-Semitic. But the corporate interests didn't stop there. You might have heard that while Democrats rushed to make money off the leaked Dobbs opinion and exploit legitimate fears that the end of Roe v. Wade was afoot, Democratic leaders like Jim Clyburn were literally campaigning for anti-choice candidate Henry Cuellar in his district, despite the fact that he's neck and neck in a runoff with a pro-choice progressive populist, Jessica Cisneros. She's right there, ready for support by the party who says they believe in choice and also likes to pretend they like to support women of color. Crypto speculator Sam Bankman-Fried spent some $10 million to promote an unknown name over a number of progressive candidates, making the race for Oregon's 6th congressional district the most expensive in the country. But even worse, that spin was amplified by the House Democratic Caucus PAC, who threw an additional $1 million into the race as well. Corporate interests also tried to take down Pennsylvania progressive Summer Lee. As Akayla Lacey reported in The Intercept, quote, the United Democracy Project, the political action committee for AIPAC, poured more than $1 million into ads in Pennsylvania's 12th district. The PAC spent more than $2.3 million on the race, most of which went to messaging attacking Lee. But this time, it didn't work. Summer Lee won an astounding victory Tuesday night despite the millions of corporate dollars funding her opponent and smears that she was anti-Semitic too. The basis of those smears, by the way, she was pointing out how the phrase Israel has a right to defend itself had been used to justify atrocities against Palestinians. Defending yourself is fine, but defending yourself isn't the issue when you're attacking worshipers at Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is what Lee was responding to at the time of her tweets. But AIPAC's preoccupation isn't rhetorical precision. Its preoccupation is crushing populist progressive candidates that are actually unbought and are therefore able to fight for the agenda majorities of Americans across the aisle want: a living wage, universal health care, environmental reform, and spending money here at home rather than on foreign interventionism. Bernie Sanders, one of the few Congress members to consistently endorse embattled progressive candidates, sounded the alarm earlier this month. Billionaires are now spending huge amounts in Democratic primaries in Pennsylvania, Texas, Oregon, and North Carolina to defeat progressives and elect corporate Democrats, he tweeted. In a two-party system, oligarchs want to own both parties. That's why Tuesday's progressive victories are such a big deal. It was a David and Goliath story. And then at least when it came to Lee, Fetterman, Charles Booker, and some others, David finally won. But here's what's really so bizarre. Even though these progressives won, in part because they were so known and respected in their communities that the smears just didn't stick, corporate media is already spinning these victories as a problem. Chris Wallace, formerly of Fox, now on CNN, hand-wrung about Fetterman's win, saying he's a risk for Democrats in a general election because he wants universal background checks and to legalize pot, two policies that are enormously popular.
I will say I have to disagree slightly with the previous panel, because while his authenticity and down-to-earthness, if there's such a phrase, played very well in the Democratic primary, you get to a general election, particularly if you end up with a moderate like Dave McCormick, there are a lot of things that the Republicans are going to have to work with in going after John Fetterman. This is a guy who is against limits on abortion. He's for universal background checks. He wants to end the filibuster. He wants to legalize pot.
Not to mention 88% of Pennsylvania voters support background checks, and a majority support the right to choose. This is what corporate media always does. Misrepresent what the people want, gaslighting us into thinking that what we really need is a do-nothing corporatist who maintains the status quo too many Americans are suffering under already. And what's really, really wild about all of this is that corporate Democrats and their media stooges regularly bash progressives as, quote, not real Democrats, all while their chosen candidates openly sabotage the Democratic Party agenda. In Oregon's 5th district, the Democratic Party's choice was Kurt Schrader, a man labeled the Joe Manchin of the House because of his ability to derail Biden's agenda. He played a key role in killing the drug pricing legislation built into the Build Back Better bill. Popular legislation that bipartisan majorities of Americans want because, we can't afford health care. Thankfully, he's losing to progressive Jamie McLeod Skinner, but not before he got millions of dollars in outside big pharma spending and a pro-Israel super PAC called Mainstream Democrats PAC. What a name. And not before he got a key endorsement from Joe Biden, the man whose agenda he killed. Make it make sense. In Biden's endorsement announcement, he said, "We don't always agree, but when it has mattered most, Kurt has been there for me, and in doing so, has helped pass much of my agenda into law." Whew. If this is what your friends look like, who needs enemies? Now, if you're wondering why progressives are doing so well, despite corporate Democrats and Republicans insisting like mean girls that nobody likes you, look to a new NBC News poll cited in a recent piece from The Lever. Nearly 2/3 of Democratic voters want a candidate who proposes larger scale policies that cost more and might be harder to pass into law, but could bring major change on the issues of healthcare, climate change, the cost of college, and economic opportunity. People are over incrementalism. We are living in the world incrementalism has wrought. It's time for a change, and this rising populist movement is ready to deliver. The question is whether populist progressives can overcome the corporatists funding the Democratic Party and plutocratic super PACs to deliver for the people. So I was triggered into writing this, Robbie, when I saw that Joe Biden was endorsing the guy who derailed his own campaign, like core part of his agenda, at the same time that progressives in my camp are constantly told that we're not real Democrats, as we run against Nina Turner that expressly said she's not a real Democrat, never being really specific about what that means, by the way, but just the vibes were, you're not on our team, you can't sit at our table, real mean girl stuff. And the very people who are A2 bruteing you, stabbing you in the back, are not only off the hook, they're actively getting your endorsement in millions and millions of dollars in corporate campaign donations. And nobody talks about that as being in conflict with the values of the Democratic Party.
No, you're right. I've talked about this a lot with Ryan when he hosts. So I try never to make the mistake of thinking things that I think are right or are good policy are necessarily popular. Some of the things I think are good policy are popular. Many of them are not. And I think a lot of political actors fall into that category. And it's easy to see with the fights between the so-called moderate or liberal Democratic wings and the progressive wings. Whereas moderate, even I can concede that moderate doesn't necessarily mean more popular. Many of the things progressives support, the policies are popular, depending on how they're framed. Now, some progressives, I think, get it like socialism is not popular. It's calling it socialism is not popular. The underlying policies might be popular.
Sure.
But yeah, Chris Wallace, not his best commentary. Pot legalization, incredibly popular. I mean, what better way to actually get people excited? Like even many Republicans support that policy now. So that was some tone deaf commentary.
Yeah, and you would not. I'm not surprised by that, given the tone of what the conversation that happened on these mainstream news channels, and also the guests they have on. I think it would be genuinely jarring for him if there was someone at the table who just said, "What are you talking about? Of course, pot's popular."
Yeah.
And just,
And as a single issue voter, I am a single issue voter. I will vote for the candidate who is most against COVID restrictions. Between Lamb and Fetterman, they were bringing back I think, a mask requirement in some city, and Lamb said, like, oh, well, that's, they get to decide that. And Fetterman said that seemed stupid to him. So that instantly, my vote was won. So.
Well, maybe someday in the not so distant future, we will be casting the ballot in a presidential race for the same person, Robbie.
How about
John
that?
Fetterman.
Easiest way to win my vote. All right, we'll have our rising panel with us. Stay tuned for that.